Welcome to another episode of Navigating Your Unretired Life. I'm really ecstatic about a person I found who is not only someone navigating their unretired life, but they're focusing on this whole climate crisis and this ecological overshoot and what to do about it in a very smart, wise way. So, without further ado, I'm going to do my book report. So, here we go. So we're talking about navigating your unretired life. Here's a book review of Ryan D. McLaren's Life After Doom. It's an audio book narrated by Brian himself, from wisdom and courage for a world falling apart. And I really like this book. We'll just go right into it and talk about what is being said about the book. Here's a description on Amazon.com. As rich and thoughtful as all of Brian McLaren's work, but with a particular urgency. That's Bill McKibben, who we've reviewed one of Bill McKibben's books, who is taking an active role working with people who are 65 and over on climate change. Riveting, challenging, brave, devastating, hopeful by Rabbi Sharon Bruce, Ikar, author of The Amen Effect. A deeply insightful exploration of how to live with wisdom, resilience, and love in our turbulent times. For the last quarter century, author and activist Brian D. McLaren has been writing at the intersection of religious faith and contemporary culture. In Life After Doom, he engages with the catastrophic failure of both our religious and political leaders to address the dominant realities of our time: ecological overshoot, economic injustice, and the increasing likelihood of civilizational collapse. McLaren defines doom as the unpeaceful, uneasy, unwanted feeling that we humans have made a mess of our civilization and our planet, and not enough of us seem to care enough to change deeply enough or quickly enough to save ourselves. Lending insights from philosophers, poets, scientists, and theologians, Life After Doom explores the complexity of hope, the necessity of grief, and the need for new ways of thinking, becoming, and belonging in turbulent times. If you want to help yourself, family, and the communities to which you belong to find courage and resilience for the deeply challenging times that are upon us, this is the book you need right now. So here's something about the author, Brian D. McLaren. And he says, when I was a boy, I dreamed of growing up to be an author. I hadn't mastered spelling yet. That's how he spelled it. I never dreamed I'd be writing books about spirituality, theology, ethics, and global crises. Instead, I wanted to write comic books. When I realized that my ability to draw had stopped developing at age 6, I gave up on being an author. Years later, I became a college English teacher, then a pastor for 24 years. During that time, someone unexpectedly, I started writing books. Now in my 60s, I write, travel, speak, and help people get equipped and organized to make a positive difference in our world. I hope you'll find in my book solutions to problems you experience, inspiration for challenges you face, and motivation to grow as an agent of needed change in our world. I was born in New York, lived in Illinois, but spent most of my growing up and child raising years outside of Washington, D.C., in Maryland. I'm married to Grace, and we have 4 wonderful adult kids and 5 absolutely amazing grandkids. Don't get me started. We live in Southwest Florida since 2009, where I enjoy a variety of outdoor pursuits, including birding, volunteering as a sea turtle monitor, and fly fishing from a kayak for tarpon. You can learn more about me and my work at my website and blog, brianmclaren.net. You'll also find links to my domains on Facebook, Twitter, etc. So here's a sneak inside the book, and I'll be brief. I want you to really read the book. But this is a great way that he's kind of looking at the world and how to deal with it. But his introduction is really good. It sets the whole team for this unpeaceful, uneasy, unwanted feeling that many of us have, and some of us don't acknowledge it, but it's still there. It's kind of hard to suppress that. Um, and so he has the book is divided actually into four parts, but the part one, and it's kind of U-shaped. You're going to go down. He's going to take you way down, and then he's going to take you up the other side of that to some pretty affirmative kind of things. But it's this part one is called letting go, path of descent. And chapter one is about his waking up to the problems of the world and realizing that I think he had outgrew just being a minister in the congregation that didn't want to focus on that. They just wanted to feel good. That's it. And and that he's not making a judgment, but he outgrew it. And then this is a serious chapter, and he really talks about welcome to reality. There's four scenarios that he talks about that are kind of throughout the thing. And it's four scenarios that we arrive upon that's kind of dealing with the criterion of time and the climate clock keep ticking down. And the first one is denial, saying, oh, it doesn't exist, and the clock keeps ticking. And then there's another group that says, yes, it does exist, and we could really, choosing technology and all the right things, we could really end this. Okay, but the clock keeps ticking. And then there's the third scenario is, well, we didn't save so many people, but at least we have a few of us that survive. So civilization is at least surviving in a very degraded way. And then the fourth one is absolute extinction, not only of species of human beings, but species life. And that's a reality. A lot of scientists are saying, hey, looking at the trajectory of how these things are going on, this is a real possibility. So and he says, when you read this book, if you got issues going on in your life and you're depressed already, then this book is not for you. Go see a therapist or go do something else or take a break and come back to this. And because I'm going to take you down to this place of reality that, is staring us in the face. But then he gets into chapter three, which is really a really good one. It's about mining your mind. That even though this stuff is happening, you've got these three, within inside of your consciousness, you have these three groups of these subcommittees that are, one is kind of reacting in different parts of your brain. Another one is community building. Another is like problem solving, and you have to kind of, negotiate and try to balance all those things out in your mind. Very interesting chapter. I really, really liked it. And then he talks about send in the poets. Poets sometimes are depressed, but they really express a lot of beauty in the way that they're looking at the world. They're kind of depressed, but they want to, really make you see it in a beautiful way of poetry and song, by the way. But when the story does harm, he says, step away. So this is a good chapter. And then, but he says, you can't just say hope. He says, in one sense, one kind of hope is kind of escapist. Oh, I hope this gets better. And then you do nothing. But there's another kind of hope that's more sophisticated, more complicated. It's called active hope. And he really cites Joanna Macy, who really has that book that we did on active hope. And I think he knows her and even cites Joanna Macy, who's in her 90s by the way, and doing some amazing work continually. So hope is complicated. And then there's a part called letting be, a place of insight. So rather than jumping right to it, you say, okay, let me really fully acknowledge this here. Let me learn how to see not only what I'm seeing outside, but let me see inside of myself, see how I'm feeling, see how, what shows up there. And then he mentions indigenous wisdom. There's something that I'm really, really sensitive to here. That here's this white guy, who comes from a certain place, a certain experience, but he keeps on referring to these indigenous people. Um, really, really, Stephen Charleston, for instance, and this African author. And he just goes back to this. So he really recognizes that maybe I don't have all the answer. We need to include more people in this. And he says indigenous wisdom is really important. I just reviewed two books by Stephen Charleston, and Letters to the Light, and then We Survived, Catastrophe book that is really, really good. So watch my videos and you'll see my reviews of these books as well. And then he says, don't read the Bible in the same old way. We had I'm in a fairly progressive church, and we had the minister always talking about reading the Bible differently with some kind of new insight. And evidently, in the course of his 25, 30 years of reading the Bible, he's got another way of seeing almost some indigenous wisdom coming out of the Bible. Very interesting. And then he says, sometimes don't go, right to judgment, but maybe some things are good, maybe some are not. And so he wants to look at that in a way. And then he realizes too that his life, that I'm like a candle. I think that's really good. I see that as you take a candle, you light it, and then it burns down, and then your light is over. But maybe you shared the light from your candle onto another person's light, who is like another candle. And so the light keeps going on. Very interesting. And then chapter 12 is really a creative thing in it. I think he had a bout with alcohol, and he didn't quite acknowledge it until one day he went into to teach and met a person who was happily in Alcoholics Anonymous, and wanted him to pray for him so he didn't have another drink, and how hard it was for him. And so he says, so this step one is like the first step of the 12-step program. And what he really does is makes a right analogy that essentially the whole society is addicted to a version of economic and ecological overshoot, and a notion of progress that's very, very, very destructive. And so how do you deal with that? So he goes into the Serenity Prayer by Reinhold Niebuhr, and several people that I recently had respect for and reviewed their stuff kept saying sometimes I have to go to that to that prayer, the Serenity Prayer. So anyway, that's a good chapter here. So you're going to step with step one, realizing there's some things that God showed the things that I can deal with, and show the ones that I don't, I can't do it the right way, and to know the difference. Basically, that's the substance of the understanding of that. And then he then talks about letting come. So we're at the kind of the bottom of in part two, but letting come starts to move up this U chart, a path of resilience. And one of the things is, he has a lot of insights. He's a fly fisherman, and he's kind of standing in the water and looking down and seeing these rocks, and he realizes how short his life is, and that our civilizations are not The first one, our civilization is not the only one that civilizations have come and gone. And the rocks below him used to be big boulders that got, whittled down by time and all of that. So it's a very insightful one that comes from his fly fishing and realizing he's, his, his feet are in this stream of change. Very interesting. And this is a really one that I'm going to take off with is imagine safe landings and new beginnings. And I do believe that this is a possibility here, particularly as we bring the world's people together for the first time and kind of bridge those tribal differences and stuff and saying, yeah, I don't care whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, we got to live in this world together. And whether or not the next president elect succeeds or not, still we have to succeed in our own survival and in our being with each other. And so, how do we imagine that? And that's what I'm doing. And he then cites people that it only takes two or three of us to really start turning that around. And he has a really nice chapter called "When Life Gets Tough, We Get Tougher." And he talks about having to babysit his grandchild who is missing mom because they went out, and rather than try to insult her, he really kind of is compassionate with her and says, I know it's tough being a kid, but sometimes we have to get tough and do that. We need to just get tougher and and understand that you miss your mom, you miss your dad. And so I think that's a real compassionate way that he rethinks how to raise his kids and how we need to get tougher ourselves. He makes an analogy here. And then the last is setting free a path of agile engagement, which really comes down to having these two thoughts. He said he was initially addicted to being very judgmental with all the bad news that he saw on in the news in the media and having a kind of a feeling like a superiority of knowing that he was smarter than the rest. And he said, but after a while that got boring and it just didn't feel good. But then he starts walking and he starts going through kind of I just think, this kind of mindfulness walking where reserving judgment, he kind of lets it come in and beauty abounds. He sees beauty where beauty had been overlooked in the trees and they was staying at somebody's house and he saw a mother robin building a nest and how sweet that was. And he was right there so he could witness this and all of the beauty that abounds. And then he starts seeing it again in people doing kind things and realizing how good, how much beauty abounds and so beauty to be charged up by. And what a great time it is to be alive. And this way of fixing things is very subtle, so it doesn't seem like he's fixing anything. He said, but what this is charging him up to continue on. And then this is a really nice one to tell them about the dream that you have. Share that dream in despite of all the challenges that you see around. I have a big dream using what I know and the background that I have to help the world to focus on a certain group of people, initially on boomers like myself, and then expand that to other people, their children and their grandchildren, and to do what I can using technology and global communications to make a difference. And so that's related to find your light and shine it. Oh, I love this. So I'm glad that this book doesn't end up, down in the dumps because I'm not. And this is really where he gets into the mindfulness walking. He said many of the insights for this book came through walking it. He had initial outline for the book, but then he realized that with those thoughts, each one of these chapter headings is kind of a represents an insight that he writes about. So you make your way by walking. And I think what he's saying is you get this insight, this spiritual insight from nature and being present in this in life, that you get these insights which are not explainable. He calls it, just don't call it God. He says it's just it's a for better agreement, say it's a power greater than we are, that we are a part of its own expression. And that definitely is coming through him and doing that. So I'm going to stop my share. And I hope that you enjoy this. I hope that you like where I'm going with these videos here. If you like where I'm going, subscribe to my channel here, clicking on that icon. And I'd love it if you weighed in with your comments uh, on the player. Love the player here. And what's on your mind? How are you navigating your life? How are you? Do you have that sense of doom sometimes? You're looking at whatever side of the election that happened. A lot of people feel divided more than ever because of the way things happen politically. But I see a bigger, more unified view that is we're in the one world, not two worlds. We're in actually one world that we have to live together and we have to work it out. And the truth will set us free. So I just think this is neat. So if you need to talk or call me, you can call me or text me at 206-920-8067. You can email me at support@newworldcom.com. You can visit my website at newworldcom.com and look at request a face-to-face Zoom call with you. So I'd love to know where you're coming from. If you have a group that you say, wow, I'm working with a group and we need to come together more. We recognize that we need to reach more people. And we like your idea of diversity and inclusion and bringing all the generations together and all of that. So this is really nice. So thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to working with you.